Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Looking to hook up with Tom Fitton, the president of Judicial Watch here. Planning to hook up with him momentarily. Let's grab clip number 7, if we can, Rob, the Chris Matthews clip, while we're hooking up with Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch. You know, we've been talking about the fact that a lot of Republicans are getting fed up with the Republican Party. 12 members of the Republican Party in the state of Maine quit. They just quit the party. They've resigned their party affiliation. Some of them were on the state committee. 7 of them were members of the state Republican committee in Maine. Now, Chris Matthews is talking with Dana Milbank of the Washington Post, and they're talking about Republicans leaving because they think the party is too conservative. But the point is the same. A lot of Republicans now pretty fed up with the lack of clear vision and direction and values on the part of the Republican Party. Let's listen.
This is a reaction to something that's been going on for some time, and Chad and the others are sort of data points here. The Republican Party has been crumbling for some period of time, and it was analogous, I think, when the Democratic Party crumbled in the South. You didn't realize how bad it was until all of a sudden things really started to pick up like this. But you've got a lot of people, Main Street Republicans, Chamber of Commerce Republicans. The phrase I'm hearing all the time now is, I'm a Republican, but. And there's like, they're not Democrats. You don't hear this man becoming a Democrat, but they're saying, I don't belong in this party anymore, and they don't know quite what to do. They don't seem to have the ability to change it.
So Republicans, it's been adrift for some time. It's beginning to fall apart. You know, and the interesting thing is I'm reading stories about how the RNC, Republican National Committee, is outraising the Democratic National Committee. The DNC is having their worst fundraising year in a decade, and the Republicans are doing pretty well. So you've still got people out there that are willing to keep the wheels turning in the Republican Party, but after a while, people are going to say, well, what does this party stand for? So it's a pretty critical time, I think, for the Republican Party, and really for people that are looking for a conservative standard bearer. Now, we're hoping to hook up with Tom Fitton, the president of Judicial Watch here, and I want to go over a little bit of this story about why I want to talk with him and bring him on this program, because Judicial Watch is a great organization. They've done a lot of excellent legal work, exposing a lot of corruption in D.C., and they filed a Freedom of Information request to get educational materials from the Department of Defense. And they came across information from the Department of Defense, primarily from the Air Force, that have to do with the kind of instructional materials that the military is using in official military settings. That's what ought to be alarming about this. And so we want to bring Tom Fitton in to talk about this, because AFA, American Family Association, is tangentially connected to this story because of the prominent role that the SPLC plays in all of this. The Southern Poverty Law Center has identified the American Family Association, has identified FRC, Concerned Women for America, as hate groups. And the military, it turns out, is apparently relying on the SPLC to identify domestic hate groups, essentially domestic terror groups that have to be monitored, that represent some kind of danger, some kind of threat to America's national security. So here with us to kind of sort through some of that and talk about what they have uncovered is Tom Fitton, who is the president of Judicial Watch. Tom, welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Brian, thanks for having me on again. Good to be with you.
You know, and Tom, you put in a Freedom of Information request, a FOIA request, back in April. And your request was for any and all records concerning, regarding, or related to the preparation and presentation of training materials on hate groups or hate crimes distributed or used by the Air Force. So that was the FOIA request. So tell us what you got back and what you found out when you looked at the information that the military released to you.
Well, we knew the SPLC was up to no good in that regard, as you discussed, but you know, this document really even goes beyond that. This is a document that is full of claptrap that essentially ties anyone who has strong political beliefs and tars and feathers them with the label extremist. And obviously there's a focus on the right side of the spectrum where they use language saying that, these days, rather than being dressed in sheets or publicly espousing hate messages, many, quote, extremists will talk of individual liberty, state rights, and how to make the world a better place.
And Tom, let me just interject here. You're actually quoting from the documents, right? This is not
that's not a paraphrase.
That's not a paraphrase.
That's exactly what the document says. And so obviously many conservatives would be listed as extremists under this definition.
Well, you think about it.
And if you're an extremist by lights of this document, they don't want you in the military.
Well, you think about that. I mean, talking of individual liberties, states' rights, and how to make the world a better place. That's what we do every day on this program, Tom. That's what Judicial Watch does. That's why you exist, is to talk about individual liberties, states' rights, and how to make the world a better place. And now they're identifying anybody who even talks like that as an extremist. And you indicate that according to these documents, people who are extremists, according to their definition, this is hard to believe, but this document is saying they are not fit for military service.
With regard to extremist organizations, which as you detailed, the SPLC would like to label virtually every conservative Christian group in the country an extremist organization, like the AFA and Family Research Council and Concerned Women for America. That membership, meaning active participation, leadership, going to rallies or doing anything substantial with them, is, quote, incompatible with military service and is therefore prohibited.
Active participation with regard to extremist organizations, and since they're using the SPLC as a source of cataloging, then that would be the American Family Association. So they would be saying that active participation with regard to extremist organizations would make you ineligible to serve in the United States military.
That's right. And just in case anyone has any question about whether they would fit, if you find yourself maybe agreeing with our founding fathers who tried to throw off the yoke of oppression against British rule, they're listed in this document as an extremist movement. And I can quote, extremist ideologies is the section. And the document states, first thing, in U.S. history, there are many examples of extremist ideologies and movements. The colonists who sought to free themselves from British rule and the Confederate States who sought to secede from the northern states are just two examples. So the founding fathers and Robert E. Lee wouldn't be welcome in today's military.
Wow, so George Washington, he was a colonist who sought to free himself along with his fellow colonists at the time from British rule. That's been categorized, labeled in these instructional materials for members of the military as an extremist ideology. George Washington, our first commander-in-chief, they wouldn't even let him enlist today.
So, you're exactly right. And this document, I would encourage your listeners to go, by the way, to our website at judicialwatch.org and read the document in its entirety. I don't know if you've been able to download and read it yet, but we've only scratched the surface. There's craziness about the 7 stages of hate. There's a 16-point guide as to what constitutes an extremist trait. It's just craziness. Now, no one wants people in the military who are rabid anti-Semites who want to kill Jews or kill blacks or kill people on the basis of their race or ethnicity or religious beliefs. But there's little talk, by the way, of any Islamic extremism. There's passing reference to 9/11, and that's about it. And of course, they could just go ahead and say that. If you're a crazy racist who wants to kill people, we really don't want you in the military. And obviously, we don't want those people in the military. But instead, they go through this politically correct psychobabble that ends up drawing a whole universe of people into their definition of extremism / terrorism and terrorist in training or terrorist in waiting. And you can't go through this document and not think that when it comes to conservative Christians, they don't want you to join the military. If this is the document they're using as a guide to what constitutes proper military activity.
I find this intriguing, Tom. I'm looking at the release that you all sent out about this information that you received from the military. And I'm just reading this quote from your release. Included in the 133 pages of lesson plans and PowerPoint slides provided by the Air Force is a January 2013 Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute student guide entitled Extremism. And a lot of the stuff is coming from that. But here's what I found interesting. The document says that it is, quote, for training purposes only, end quote, and here's an instruction, quote, do not use on the job, end quote. So to me, the impression that creates, and tell me if I'm wrong here, it creates the impression that we want to train you in this, our view of what extremism is, but we don't want you talking about this to anybody. We don't want you to use this on the job because obviously we're the ones that are extremists, and that's not something we're sure we want the public to be aware of.
Yeah, that is peculiar language, isn't it? And you know, it suggests that, quote, this can't be the regulation that you're held to account for, but keep this in your back pocket as you look at. And these are for, it looks to me like this is training for officers involved with personnel and human resources issues in the military. So these are significant people in positions of command in the military who are being trained on really in the back of the room. In back rooms with this political craziness.
Now, how do you think, we got about 60 seconds here, Tom, how did SPLC get to the place where they are a trusted cataloger or labeler of hate groups? How did that happen? Why does the military pay any attention to what they say?
Well, they have a good PR operation, and for a long time they had focused exclusively on groups that we would probably all agree are hate groups. But evidently they didn't think that was good enough, so they started to expand their mission to attack anyone who disagrees with liberalism. And that's why the FA and FRC and CWA and all these other good conservative groups are in their target lines.
Our guest has been Tom Fitton. He is the president of Judicial Watch, an organization doing absolutely great work exposing government corruption. You can get more information and download this report at judicialwatch.org, judicialwatch.org. Well, Tom, listen, I really appreciate the work you've done on this. This is great work. I appreciate you uncovering this information, bringing it to light, and thank you for taking time out of your schedule to spend a few minutes with us.
Well, I appreciate your covering this important story any way we can help.
Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch. Thanks, Tom. Good to have you on the program. So that's what's going on. I mean, this is an amazing thing. Extremists include the colonists who sought to free themselves from British rule. Wouldn't be eligible to serve in today's military. Back in 2.